Happy Tally, X-ers. I'm Dee, and as always, this is my BFF and feline life mate, Stud. You know, Christmas is a season for giving, for celebrations, and for togetherness. But for some, the holidays have turned what should be joyous moments into unimaginable tragedy. Today on the Gen X Files, we'll explore 5 chilling true crime cases that occurred during Christmas. From tragic family massacres to outright evil events, these 5 stories reveal the darkness lurking behind the festive glow. On December 23, 1927, at the height of the Roaring Twenties, the quiet town of Cisco, Texas was bustling with holiday preparations. The festive mood was shattered when Marshall Ratliff, disguised as Santa Claus, strolled into the First National Bank. Accompanying him were 3 accomplices, Henry Helms, Robert Hill, and Lewis Davis. Together, they planned a heist that would go down as one of the most audacious and chaotic crimes in Texas history. Using a stolen car, Ratliff and gang drove to an alley about a block from the bank. Emerging from the car, dressed as Santa Claus, a costume borrowed from Mrs. Midge Tellett, who ran the boarding house where they had been staying in Wichita Falls, he was followed on foot to the bank by a line of children wondering what Santa was up to. Ratliff's Santa greeted customers warmly before pulling a gun and announcing the robbery. The gang forced bank employees to empty the vault, seizing $12,000 in cash and securities, a substantial fortune for the time. However, their plan began to unravel when Mrs. B.P. Blassingame and her daughter entered the bank in the middle of the holdup. Despite warnings from the robbers that they would shoot, Mrs. Blassingame let her daughter out a side door. She ran into the alley and screamed for help, alerting Chief of Police Bedford and most of the citizens that were out and about the robbery. In their desperate bid to escape, the gang took multiple hostages, including 2 small girls, Laverne Comer and Emma Mae Robertson, using them as human shields to fend off armed townspeople and law enforcement. The ensuing chaos led to the deaths of 2 police officers, Chief Bedford and Deputy George Carmichael, leaving a tragic stain on what was meant to be a festive season. The robbers' poorly thought-out plan hit another snag when their getaway car ran out of fuel, forcing them to abandon the vehicle and their loot with a severely wounded Lewis Davis. They attempted to steal another vehicle from 14-year-old Woody Harris, but Woody was smart enough to turn over the car, but not the keys. In the midst of the mayhem, the mob captured Davis and recovered the stolen money, which they promptly returned to the bank. A massive manhunt for Helms, Hill, and Ratliff ensued, involving both law enforcement and enraged citizens. Over the course of several days, more shootouts occurred, leading to the capture of the starving, wounded, yet still surviving robbers. According to the Texas State Historical Association's account of the Santa Claus Bank Robbery, the Texas Bankers Association offered a $5,000 reward for the legal killing of each bank robber through their Dead Bank Robber Reward program. This may have played a role in fueling the extensive manhunt. Like they say, don't mess with Texas. Lewis Davis had previously succumbed to injuries sustained during the robbery, while Helms and Hill were sentenced and convicted of their crimes and other charges. Besides the 2 police officers, there had been 6 townspeople wounded in the shootout, but no one was sure whether the robbers or the mob was responsible. As for Ratliff, his story took an even darker turn. He was convicted of armed robbery in January 1928 and sentenced to 99 years, later receiving a death sentence for his role in the 2 deaths. He appealed and feigned insanity, ultimately convincing his jailers. Eastland County citizens demanded action. After Ratliff attempted to escape, resulting in killing a jailer, an angry mob overpowered authorities and hanged Ratliff on November 19, 1928. No one was ever tried in association with the lynching, and just for funsies, several thousand persons viewed Ratliff's body the next day at a furniture store in Eastland before a judge ordered the corpse locked up. The Santa Claus Bank Robbery remains a chilling yet bizarre chapter in American history. It highlights how desperation and poor planning can spiral into shocking violence. The event left a lasting impact, both as a grim reminder of the dangers of criminal ambition and as a strange tale of holiday crime that Texas and the nation would never forget. On Christmas Day, 1929, the peaceful rural community of Germantown, North Carolina, was shaken to its core by a heinous act of violence committed by Charles Lawson, a tobacco farmer. In a time when many struggled under the weight of the Great Depression, Lawson's actions shocked the nation and left a haunting legacy that endures to this day. The day started unexpectedly. Charles Lawson, known for his modest means, treated his family to a rare luxury, a trip to town for a family portrait. Such an expense was unusual, especially during the economic hardships of the era. The portrait captured Lawson, his wife Fanny, and their 7 children dressed in their Sunday best, appearing as a close-knit, wholesome family. No one could have imagined that this image would soon serve as a grim reminder of what was about to unfold. After returning home from town, the festive atmosphere quickly turned to horror. Armed with a shotgun, Charles Lawson began his rampage. First, he targeted his 2 daughters, Carrie and Mabel, who were outside the home. He shot both and then bludgeoned them to ensure they were dead. Next, Lawson entered the house, where he ended the lives of his wife Fanny and their 4 younger children, Marie, James, Raymond, and the youngest, 4-month-old Mary Lou. The baby's life was ended in an especially brutal manner, bludgeoned to death. The bodies of the family members were found with their arms crossed and rocks under their heads. After the attacks, Lawson fled into the nearby woods, where hours later he ended his own life with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The sole survivor of the family was Lawson's 16-year-old son Arthur, who had been sent away on an errand by his father earlier that day, sparing him from the massacre. In the aftermath, many struggled to comprehend what could have driven Charles Lawson to commit such a monstrous act. Over the years, several theories have emerged. As a farmer during the Great Depression, Lawson faced immense economic pressures, which some believe may have contributed to a mental breakdown. Darker rumors suggested an alleged inappropriate relationship between Lawson and his eldest daughter Marie. According to the second-hand accounts of friends and family members, it was insinuated that Marie had become pregnant with Charles's baby, and Fanny was at least suspicious of such. While there's no definitive proof, this speculation has fueled macabre fascination with the case. Some have pointed to potential signs of deteriorating mental health, possibly brought about by a head injury sustained months before the crime. In the weeks leading up to the massacre, Lawson exhibited peculiar behavior, including the decision to take the family portrait, which in hindsight seemed like a deliberate attempt to preserve their image before the tragedy. However, his autopsy results showed no problem with his noggin.
Oh, hi, thanks for checking in. I'm still a piece of garbage.
The horrifying crime captured national attention, turning the Lawson farm into a macabre tourist attraction. Even a cake that Marie had baked on Christmas Day was displayed on the tour. Because visitors began to pick at the raisins on the cake to take as souvenirs, it was placed in a covered glass cake server for many years. Arthur Lawson, the lone survivor, carried the weight of his family's tragedy for the rest of his short life. Sadly, he was killed in a motor vehicle accident in 1945 at the age of 35, leaving behind a wife and 4 children. The Lawson family incident remains one of the most haunting and debated family tragedies in U.S. history. The combination of shocking brutality, unanswered questions, and the eerie family portrait taken hours before the massacre has cemented its place in true crime Christmas lore. This case takes us to Dayton, Ohio, where a group of teenagers turned the holiday season into a time of terror. Known as the Downtown Posse, this gang, led by a 19-year-old half-wit named Marvelous Keene, embarked on a horrifying killing spree just days before Christmas in 1992. Their rampage left 6 people dead and 2 others injured, leaving an indelible scar on the city. On December 24th, Keene and his accomplices, Heather Matthews, DeMarcus Smith, and Keene's girlfriend, 16-year-old Laura Taylor, started their spree by murdering Joseph Wilkerson, a man they lured to his home with the promise of some, sexy time. Instead, he was tied to his bed with electrical cords and shot to death with his own weapon. They ransacked his house, stealing his car and valuables to fund their spree. Fueled by drugs and greed, the gang's violence escalated. Later that same day, they murdered Danita Goulet, a 19-year-old mother and a senior at Patterson Cooperative High School, as she used a payphone. They shot her 5 times in cold blood, just to steal her plaid coat, Fila sneakers, and a backpack containing 50 cents, items they later bragged about taking. Goulet's death was a senseless act of cruelty that shocked even seasoned investigators. The group returned to Wilkerson's house where they attempted the slaying of Matthew's ex-boyfriend, Jeffrey Wright. Smith put 4 bullets into Wright's legs, according to police, but he escaped to a neighbor's house and survived. The spree continued into Christmas Day. The gang fatally shot Richmond Maddox, Laura Taylor's former boyfriend, in what police described as a personal vendetta. Laura and Richmond left Richmond's parents' house in his vehicle, being trailed behind by Keene, Smith, and Matthews, in Wilkerson's stolen vehicle. Maddox eventually noticed the trailing car, became suspicious, and gunned the accelerator. Taylor wasted no time in putting a derringer to his right temple and discharging the weapon. She bailed before the car could crash and made a quick getaway with the posse in the trailing vehicle. On December 26th, the gang entered the short-stop mini-market where Sarah Abraham, mother of 3, was working behind the counter. Keene shot Abraham twice in the head. A witness in the store was also shot, but survived. This time they got away with $44, $43.50 more than their previous take. Hours later, their path of destruction claimed 2 more lives, 16-year-old Wendy Cottrell and 18-year-old Marvin Washington. The teens were executed by the gang, who feared they might snitch to the police. They were shot execution style behind a pile of dirt and wouldn't be found until the posse was in custody. The gang's rampage ended on December 26th when police apprehended all 4 members, driving a stolen vehicle they carjacked at gunpoint. For such brazen, merciless individuals, the posse was taken in without much fanfare. The community was left reeling, mourning the lives lost to what seemed like senseless violence. Prosecutors described the killings as a calculated spree of murder and robbery, motivated by power, thrill-seeking, and callous disregard for human life. Marvelous Keene was convicted of 5 murders and sentenced to death by lethal injection. Keene, at age 36, was executed in 2009. Marvelous, do you have a statement? Asked Warden Philip Kearns before the lethal cocktail of 3 drugs was administered. No, Keene said, I have no words. His accomplices received life sentences, ensuring they would never harm anyone again. The Downtown Posse's killing spree is remembered as one of the most shocking crimes in Dayton's history, a tragic reminder of how lives can be destroyed by misguided youth and unchecked violence. As the holiday season approached that year, Dayton was left grieving. Instead of joy and celebration, families mourned their loved ones, stolen by a senseless act of brutality. Even today, the events of December 1992 remain a chilling reminder of the fragility of peace and safety during the holidays. Christmas Eve in Covina, California in 2008 should have been a joyful celebration for the Ortega family. Their home, filled with warmth and the sounds of laughter, was hosting an annual holiday gathering, a cherished tradition. But for this piece of shit, also known by his government name Bruce Jeffrey Pardo, aged 45, it became the stage for a horrific act of vengeance. Dressed in a Santa Claus suit, Pardo arrived at his ex-wife Sylvia Ortega Pardo's family home carrying a gift wrap package. Inside the package was a homemade flamethrower, along with multiple firearms, tools of destruction meticulously prepared to execute his chilling plan. When I say Pardo was a piece of shit, I wasn't kidding. During their marriage, Pardo was a miser with money. Making substantially more than Sylvia, he insisted that she support her 3 children from a previous marriage on her meager flower nursery income. In addition to that, he refused to open a joint checking account, keeping his 6-figure salary all to himself. If that's not enough, Sylvia soon realized that he had behaved in much the same way during his previous engagement to another woman, except they did have a joint account. While at the time Pardo was making a fraction of the income he did when he was married to Sylvia, the couple agreed on a pricey wedding and honeymoon to Tahiti, most if not all his blushing soon-to-be bride would pay for. On the day of the wedding, old Bruce Pardo didn't show up. Leaving his fiancée at the altar, he instead withdrew all the money in their joint bank account and used it on a trip to Palm Springs, Florida. But wait, there's more. During their marriage, Sylvia found out, though I'm not sure how, that Pardo had a son from a previous relationship. That son fell into a swimming pool during Pardo's watch and suffered irreparable brain damage. Needing constant care and the money to pay for it, Pardo dipped, never speaking to or sending a dime to his son, though he happily and illegally claimed him as a dependent on his tax return each year. That was enough for Sylvia. Realizing Pardo was nothing like the man she thought she married, she filed for divorce, after he tossed her belongings on the front lawn. In June 2008, Sylvia was awarded $1,700 a month in alimony from Bruce. His first alimony check bounced, and he stopped payment on the second. A month later, he was fired from his job for fraudulently billing clients for work not actually performed. His unemployment claim, as you may have guessed, was denied. With no income, the judge waived his alimony. Having no income and drowning in debt, however, didn't stop Pardo from purchasing a cache of firearms and ammunition. He was devising a plan, even purchasing a plane ticket to Canada as a decoy to mislead future investigators into thinking he had fled. At around 11:30 p.m. on Christmas Eve, dressed as Santa and carrying weapons disguised as wrapped Christmas packages, Pardo knocked on the door of the Ortega home. When his 8-year-old niece excitedly answered, thinking it was Santa Claus, Pardo pulled a weapon from a decorated box and critically injured her. He then stepped inside and opened fire indiscriminately on the family, ending the lives of 9 people, including his ex-wife Sylvia, her parents, siblings, and a 17-year-old nephew. Survivors described the scene as one of sheer terror, with people scrambling to escape through windows or hiding wherever they could. Pardo then used a fucking flamethrower to set the house ablaze, engulfing the once lively home in flames. The fire was so intense that it took 80 firefighters hours to extinguish, leaving little more than ashes and charred remains. Among the survivors were 3 who managed to escape, including the young girl who had been shot. The Santa suit, the gift-wrapped weapons, and the timing of the attack on Christmas Eve were all calculated to inflict maximum emotional and physical devastation. Pardo was literally strapped with cash, $17,000 to be exact, and he had purchased a plane ticket for a Christmas morning flight to Iowa to visit with a friend. However, he had sustained 2nd and 3rd-degree burns from the fire in the house he set ablaze. He changed out of his Santa suit and drove to his brother's home in Sylmar, California, where he offed himself on his brother's couch using one of his weapons. Inside his rental car parked nearby, police found remnants of his Santa suit, booby-trapped so that moving the suit would trigger a fire and set off 200 rounds of ammunition. Moreover, when they searched his home, police found what they called a virtual bomb-making factory. Not including Bruce Pardo, because who gives a fuck, 9 people perished in the massacre, and 3 were injured. The Covina Christmas Eve massacre stunned the nation, leaving an indelible mark on the community. The tragedy not only shattered the Ortega family, but also raised awareness about the devastating consequences of unchecked rage and premeditated violence. What should have been a night of peace and goodwill turned into a grim reminder of how vengeance and emotional turmoil can lead to unimaginable horrors. To this day, the events of that night serve as a somber tale of lost lives, a broken system, and the importance of addressing mental health and conflict before they spiral into irreversible tragedy. What would a video about Christmas crimes be without touching on one of the most infamous of all? Few cases in American history have captivated the public's attention as profoundly as the tragic and mysterious death of 6-year-old JonBenét Ramsey. What should have been a day of joy and celebration on Christmas morning 1996 in the Ramsey household in Boulder, Colorado, quickly spiraled into one of the most puzzling and haunting cases of the 20th century. JonBenét, a bubbly and bright young girl, had become a familiar face on the beauty pageant circuit, known for her winsome smile and competitive spirit. But on that fateful Christmas morning, the innocent holiday turned into a nightmare. JonBenét's parents, John and Patsy Ramsey, awoke to discover their daughter missing, and a chilling handwritten ransom note was found, demanding $118,000, a sum eerily close to the exact amount of John Ramsey's recent Christmas bonus. The note seemed to suggest a kidnapping. However, as the hours passed, an eerie feeling settled in. John Ramsey eventually found JonBenét's lifeless body in the basement of their home, hidden behind a wine cellar door. She had been strangled with a garrote and suffered blunt force trauma to her head. The nature of the injuries pointed to a brutal and premeditated attack rather than a random act of violence. The discovery sent shockwaves through Boulder and across the nation. It was a case that struck the public's conscience deeply. How could a child, so young and seemingly innocent, meet such a violent end in what was supposed to be the safety of her own home? The gruesome details of the crime, combined with JonBenét's beauty queen status, only fueled the intense media frenzy that surrounded the case. From the start, the case was embroiled in controversy and speculation. As investigators began their work, suspicion quickly turned to JonBenét's own family, particularly her parents, John and Patsy Ramsey, as well as her 9-year-old brother, Burke. Critics of the investigation pointed to the oddly staged ransom note, questioning its authenticity and the possibility that it was written by someone within the family. There were also inconsistencies in the initial accounts given by JonBenét's parents, which led to widespread public doubt. The police came under scrutiny for their handling of the crime scene, and the initial investigation raised many questions. Why was JonBenét found in the basement, yet the ransom note was found upstairs? Was there evidence that the family had been involved, or were they victims of a deeply intricate crime? Despite intense media pressure and public suspicion, no concrete evidence linked the Ramseys to JonBenét's death. In 2008, the case took a new turn when DNA testing revealed the presence of unidentified male DNA on JonBenét's clothing. This discovery led to renewed theories that an intruder may have been responsible for her death, shifting suspicion away from the Ramsey family. However, no suspect has ever been definitively identified, and many questions remain. The idea of an intruder seemed plausible, but the lack of a clear suspect has kept the case in the realm of theories rather than facts. Some theories point to a botched kidnapping by a stranger, while others suggest a family cover-up in which the true perpetrator remained hidden. Despite the presence of the DNA evidence, the case has not resulted in any arrests, and the conflicting theories only add to the complexity of solving the mystery. The death of JonBenét Ramsey remains one of the most infamous unsolved crimes in modern history, and it continues to captivate public attention to this day. The case has inspired numerous documentaries, books, and television specials, each attempting to unravel the truth behind the crime. The striking contrast between JonBenét's pageant persona, a young girl dressed in frilly dresses and sparkling crowns, and the brutal nature of her death has kept the case in the public eye. As the years have passed, the questions surrounding JonBenét's death remain unanswered, and the case continues to elicit widespread interest. Her story has become a symbol of innocence lost as the search for answers endures. The case serves as a painful reminder that sometimes even the most tragic stories remain unresolved, leaving those who love JonBenét and the public at large with more questions than answers. These chilling cases remind us of the fragility of peace and joy, even during the most festive season. As we reflect on these stories, let's hold our loved ones close and appreciate the moments that truly matter. Thank you for joining Stud and I on this journey into the darker side of Christmas. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more true crime and pop culture explorations. This is the Gen X Files. TTFN. Ta-ta for now.